Today I'm going to talk about who you are, your identity, how you think of yourself, your personality. These are all traits that we assign to ourselves. In other words, how do you think of yourself? Are you an outgoing, talkative person? Are you introverted, quiet? Are you smart, a thinker, a talker, a doer? Are you fun? Are you funny? Are you really passionate or soft inside? Or are you really tough? Obviously, I can keep going on, but the point is, you have a way of thinking of yourself, who you are, your way of being, your personality, your identity. And you are defining yourself by all these traits, adjectives, way of being, way of thinking. I'm a open-minded person, or very opinionated, or et cetera, all these ways you could think of yourself. And these ways of thinking of yourself, the identity that you are giving yourself, is keeping you in that box or that lane. You're keeping yourself. And what I mean by that is none of this is stone or set in stone. None of it is really true. It's all something you've created with your mind. Everything that you think of as yourself, this is how I am, this is what I'm like, that's all thoughts in your mind. You've created that in your mind. There's nothing actually definitive about it. There's nothing like law of nature about it. In other words, we have tended to or think of ourselves as a self, like a sort of, there's a set in stone self that's underneath it all. Maybe we have some different personality traits on top, or we've learned some ways of behaving in a work setting or with friends or whatever, but we know myself is underneath, like the real me. We always talk about get to know me, or be yourself. All these phrases and ways of thinking about who am I really, and how do I be myself more? And I like people that I can be myself around. All these things about being yourself, finding your true self, right? A lot of the personal development sphere is about finding your true self and all that. And so I was into all that, and I was constantly defining myself in a certain way, and then I wanted to change how I'm behaving, and I define my true self, and how can I really be myself. I was doing this for years and years with all sorts of personal development type seminars, retreats, books, podcasts, all that. And finally, I was introduced about a year ago to the Buddhist concept of the illusion of self. And I was introduced by Sam Harris through his Waking Up meditation app, which I still use every day, and I highly recommend. I'm not affiliated anyway, but it's changed my life, so I'll definitely recommend it. And so one of the concepts that he talks about in that app is this Buddhist concept of the illusion of self, which is what I was just saying about the way that you think of yourself, the way you define yourself, and just the idea that you have a self that's inside of you that's a certain way is an illusion. It's just created by your thoughts. It's just a construct of thought. It's ideas. It's from the mind. It's not real. It's an illusion. And this was mind-blowing for me once I really took it in, because I was doing so much work on myself to change myself, to make myself better, all the while not realizing that self is an illusion. In other words, I'm working on something that's not real. So I'm fighting this battle of the mind. It's this one other changes or new self that I want to create versus this old self, but that's also in the mind. They're both in the mind. So I'm just having this battle of the mind. Meanwhile, I'm not changing, and I'm not feeling good about myself, because I'm like telling myself, oh, your self is not good. We need this new self to take its place. And so you're not good because you got to get better to do this new self. So I'm not feeling good about myself because I'm telling myself that I'm no good. And I'm using the word self a lot. Maybe it's getting a little confusing. But the point about this illusion of self is that it is limiting and it's holding you in the life that you're in. It's confining you because you're confining yourself to this definition or this description of yourself. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, there's this famous scene where he goes to see, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, goes to see the Oracle, and in the waiting room, there's a kid, and he's got a spoon, and he's bending the spoon with his mind. And, or not physically, with his power, whatever it is. And Neo, Keanu Reeves, tries to do it, can't do it. And the kid's like, the key is, do not try to bend the spoon. Instead, you must realize the truth. There is no spoon. And if you watch this again, you'll see that the kid is dressed like a Buddhist monk. And that's intentional. The filmmakers are using this concept from Buddhism of the illusion of self. And that's what this scene is really about. And in some ways, it's a lot what the movie, The Matrix, is about. But this scene in particular, the kid is saying it's this concept of the illusion of self. So don't try to change yourself. Don't try to bend the spoon. Don't try to change yourself. Just realize the truth. There is no spoon. There is no self, right? In other words, in order to change yourself, you have to realize that there is no self, that the self that you're thinking of is just something you're thinking of. And once you realize, oh, that's just thoughts, that's just ideas that I have about myself, I can then let those go because they're not inherent in me. They're not part of me physically that I have to move or shake or change in some drastic way. They're just ideas that I can let go of once I realize that's an illusion. And let me give my own personal journey because it's maybe sounding a little, I don't know, wacky or like self, no self, whatever. How does that apply to real life? The Matrix, that's a movie. Who cares? Basically, I started writing down, identifying what are my selves? What are the identities that I associate with myself? And so, for example, one was I'm a filmmaker, writer, director. And so that's one self I have. And what goes along with that is I'm good at writing, right? I'm good at creating imaginary world scenarios, stories in my mind. I'm good at writing them down, and I'm good at directing other people to act them out, but I'm not going to be acting them out. I'm behind the camera. I'm writing the words for other people to say, right? This is all wrapped up in this identity, and it predates even being a filmmaker. Before I was a filmmaker, when I was a teenager in high school, I was like telling my friends funny things, and then they would say them to the group. Like I was behind the curtain. I was in the shadows. I was like telling my friend, whispering kind of the funny jokes, and then they would say it out loud and get the attention. But I didn't want to say it out loud. I didn't want to get the attention. And I talked about this in a previous video that I had a trauma in the first grade that kind of created this story of I don't want to be in the spotlight. But that was, I don't want to get into that right now, but just more important right now is just the identity that was formed. And so as I'm looking at this identity now, I'm seeing that it's not really true. In other words, I can speak the words myself, right? And this is leading right now to this moment where I'm making this video and I'm speaking the words. I'm not writing them and giving them to an actor to say. So this is like a direct result you can see right now. But I also started performing comedy improv here in Bali, and I also started doing some stand-up, and I did a one-man show that was like a 2-hour stand-up comedy plus long-form storytelling plus theater, because I was playing some different characters. And actually that show was about identity. It was about the identity that I had, and it had to do with women. And the identity that I had in relation to women was basically, I need to protect myself from them, that I will get hurt by women if I'm too close to them, if I develop too close a relationship. So I always kept walls up in between me and women, never had super deep connected relationships because I had these protective walls up. I was scared of getting hurt. That's another identity that was keeping me a certain way, but wasn't inherently true. In other words, it's not, yeah, obviously you can get hurt by women or the opposite sex when you're in any kind of relationship with them, but also you can have great, amazing relationships, and getting hurt is part of it, but it doesn't need to prevent me from experiencing all the positive parts of relationships with women. But I had this identity, that I had this idea of myself as being not good with women, not able to talk to them, not attractive to them, all these kind of stories that were wrapped up in this idea of myself, the way I was looking at myself. And once I realized, or once I learned this concept of the illusion of self, and I realized these were just thoughts that I was having about myself. I'm actually not bad or good with women. I'm just creating that in my mind. And once I started to let go of that identity, and then I did this whole one-man show about it, which also was part of letting it go, just airing it out, sharing all my secrets and things I'm embarrassed about, all my past shenanigans and struggles with women. And then all of a sudden it was much easier to talk to women. But it was just letting go of this version of myself. It wasn't like previously to that, I tried all these other kinds of things, like books on how to talk to women, or how to be more confident, how to be engaging in the conversation, NLP, all this stuff. And it was all more exercises of the mind. In other words, I had to keep these tips or guides or advice in my mind and then execute it from the mind. But it never felt like I was being me, or like that I was just engaging in a fun conversation or relationship. It was all like I was running the script in my mind, essentially. And so that was not ultimately fulfilling, and it also did not even really get the results I was after. Maybe got me further along with certain women, and had whatever sexual encounters that went well. But ultimately I was wanting a deeper connection, a real relationship, and those things didn't work because eventually the script runs out, or it doesn't lead to any deeper connection. But now, once I let go of this identity, this version of myself that has to do those scripts or tactics, or I'll be terrible with women, right? That was how I was thinking of myself. Now, I'm not doing either of those things. In other words, I'm not thinking myself as terrible with women. I'm also not running scripts or tactics or thinking about that. And so I'm no longer defined by that version of myself or that identity. And when I talk with women now, I find myself just talking more freely and not worrying so much about what I'm saying the wrong thing, which used to always plague me. I was always worried about saying the wrong thing with women. And then, of course, I said the wrong thing, self-fulfilling prophecy. But now I just find myself more comfortable, and I'm not thinking of the results that I'm trying to get from the interaction and all that. And this is where realizing this illusion of self allows for that, because I'm not trying to become this new self that's super confident and with women and charismatic and all that. I'm just releasing the whole idea of a self, of there's a definition of how I am and how I act. And when there's no definition of that's keeping me contained in my mind, then I'm just talking freely, engaging freely, and feeling much better and feeling more connected, and people are responding better, women and men, just everyone I'm encountering. And basically, okay, if there is no self, what are you? What am I? And according to Buddhism, or how I understood it from this app that I mentioned, Waking Up, yeah, everyone's a flow. You're a flow. We're changing every moment. And we know this physically. We know cells are dying and generating every moment. We are, but it's the same thing with personality. We're a flow. Everything is changing. Every experience we have changes us in some way. We're just a flow. We're moving. We're changing in every moment, which means you don't have to worry about defining yourself or I'm a certain way. You just it's just about removing that idea and those constraints, and then just allowing yourself to flow through life. And I know flow has become maybe an overused word and a buzzword in certain communities or schools of thought, and I'm in the flow, or go with the flow. That's the saying that people use. So don't get caught up on the word. The flow is not the point. The point is just that that the idea of self, the way you think of yourself, is chains. It's handcuffs that's holding you and keeping you a certain way. And all you have to do actually is take off the handcuffs, take off the chains. You don't have to replace it with anything else. You just have to get off all those chains, and then you can just run and fly, basically. And you don't have to worry about, I'm supposed to be a certain way, or how am I, or who am I. You just are, and you go. And it sounds maybe a little woo-woo, a little spiritual, but it's not really, because it's all how you are experiencing and feeling and thinking, and realizing that that is determining your whole life. And all you have to do is realize that you're in chains, you're in a cage, you're holding yourself in a cage, and you have the key. You have the key. You can unlock it at any time and release all these ideas of yourself and step out of that cage and really shine and fly and give all your gifts to the world, and just live your best life. Keep watching for more. I'm doing this myself. This is all happening in real time. I'm doing all this work on myself, and keep checking in to see how I'm going on my journey.